Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we're discussing my thoughts on episode 5 of the anime series Norn9. And I thoroughly loved the hell out of this episode because, for those who don't know, I'm a lifelong Disney movie fan, and that's not just talking about the Renaissance era in the 90s, things like, Beauty and the Beast, The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, The Lion King, those kinds of things. I'm also talking about classic Disney films such as Snow White, Cinderella, Pinocchio, Sleeping Beauty being my all-time favorite classic Disney film, and this episode was right up my alley, even though, Little Red Riding Hood isn't actually a property that has been handled by Disney, respectively. Snow White and Cinderella are, and, all of those aspects delving into sort of, the inner workings of the minds of the main trio we're following, Nanami, Koharu, and Mikoto, respectively, as well as their respective, male counterparts and everything like that, and the twists and turns. Just absolutely loved this episode for everything it was. I could see certain people tuning in and being like, WTF is going on here? But from the word go, I was transfixed. You basically have that trio in the bath, basically just mulling over their circumstances, where we left things in the previous episode, and they're all consumed with their respective male counterparts in one, frame or another. And you have Itsuki, who is in the male side of the bathhouse area. He puts through this pipeline that is connected to both, this paperwork or whatever it is to have these girls agree to. And it's very weird. This is the doorway. When they go to bed that night, this is the doorway that awakens them into this fantasy dream world, dreamscape kind of thing, and they're all decked out in costumes befitting of who they're supposed to represent. In Nanami's case, she looks very much like Red Riding Hood, and when I first saw her, that was my first impression, but I wasn't sure until after they actually come out and say this is what's going on, whether that was the case or not. And then of course Itsuki comes in cat form and gets tickled to death by Nanami, who first tried to throw a dagger at him. I completely lost it with that. That's like her special move, to tickle him to death. Koharu is very much embodying Snow White, and Mikoto is Cinderella, and it's just really interesting that. And the whole mission statement is for them, it's unspoken that they have to kind of overcome certain, internal conflict-related hurdles, but they have to find the person of importance for each of them. And I suspected from right out of the gate that this was meant to be their male counterparts outside this fantasy realm. What's really interesting is, as we start debuting other characters that are involved, there's a certain level of self-awareness that they know the part they're playing. They seem to be aware they're in a dream world, but it's sort of ambiguous by the end. Are they really aware of it? And it seems as though this is a theme that will continue into the next episode, per the PV for the next episode, where it seems like they experienced the dream too. The guys did as well. So how much of that is going to be retained in their memories, I don't know, and such like that. But it's really kind of twisted and emotional, especially with Mikoto, as we find that, of course, she is Cinderella, and she loses the glass slipper. Her prince is meant to be Sakuya, and that whole thing, she ends up in the arms of Itsuki because it's kind of his ruse. He takes on the persona of Sakuya, and then the real Sakuya in that dream fantasy realm is left to look on in just horror as he sees Mikoto embracing Itsuki, and it's kind of emotional, because we call back on the fact that apparently Sakuya has openly shared with her this vision that I was talking about, in the previous episode. It was in fact confirmed that he witnessed his own death, and his death is in saving Mikoto, if we're to believe the brass tacks of that whole sequence, as we saw in the previous episode. And she wants nothing more than to rescue him and save him and not have him die. And that very much speaks to my speculation that she feels for him so very deeply, And I think that's why she has been, you know, keeping him at an arm's length as she has, because, you know, she's kind of inadvertently distancing herself because she knows the pain of his future. Maybe if she keeps him at arm's length, he won't be put into a scenario where he would have to lose his life to save her and that kind of thing. So all of that. But then to see Sakuya very much heartbroken in that moment, especially if he carries this awareness into the waking world again, it's just like, oh my God. You know, as far as the idea of shipping characters, I really want to see it work out for them. I want to see Mikoto actually be able to save his life, but I feel like it's probably set in stone. Sakuya is not too long for the wind, and now he has the heartbreak of this scenario he may carry out of a dream, whether or not he even subscribes to the idea that this is something real or genuine. But what is Itsuki's role in all of this? He seems consumed with Mikoto, and it's kind of a scenario where it almost left me suspecting maybe he knows somehow what's coming for Sakuya, and he wants to be able to get the shoe in the door now for the time after Sakuya has passed on, and be there for Mikoto because he has his own interest in her. I don't know. I'd like to think he's trying to be the better man, but it could just be, you know, hey, I like her. You know, I'm going to make my move. And his whole spiel in that moment about if you need me, if you need to see me as Sakuya to come into my arms, you know, then that's how it'll be, and all that kind of stuff. It's just really, I don't know, it's just really kind of disheartening and at the same time utmost compelling, all of that. With Nanami, of course, we see this ongoing battle with Akito, and it's two versions of Akito. One who is bloodthirsty and literally trying to choke her to death, and I'm just cringing through that entire sequence. But the other half of that is the Akito who is like made up to look like the wolf, you know, or at least kind of, with the ears and a tail, and, you know, seeing Nanami become unabashed and just absolutely adoring him in that guise, because she is so sort of dispassionate about everything else. To see the emotion and the lust, I mean, she launches at him when she sees him like that. And it's interesting how they flip it on its ear, in a sense, because the regular Akito in this fantasy world is the bad Akito, and then this wolf who's supposed to be within the confines of, you know, the whole Red Riding Hood scenario, the wolf is supposed to be the bad one, yet it's the wolf who saves her. And so it's somewhat touching that. And again, it's one of those things where I wish we could see these two characters come together and understand each other, and whatever, you know, because again, insights into their past, we find some clarification that apparently it was not powers, as I suspected by the end of the last episode, that Nanami apparently took from Akito, but it was memories of someone of great importance to him. I'm assuming maybe like his mother or his parents or something like that. I don't necessarily believe it was someone he was in love with necessarily. And it'd be an interesting twist if the person she removed from his memories was herself. That would be quite compelling as well. But again, it's one of those things where now that we've gained this further insight into who they are, it just leads me that much more to wanting to see them come together. In a sense, and very much as pertains to Koharu and Kakaru in this, talk about symbolism, man. You know, and then the little chicks are the seven dwarves as well, and you know, Senri's like sleepy or dopey, whatever it is. I just thought that was hilarious, but the symbolism in the idea that, of course, Kakaru wants nothing more than to get with Koharu. Koharu is maybe not there yet in her mind, like, you know, thoughts along those lines. At the end of this episode, she probably is, because of the kiss and everything, and being almost willing to risk herself for him. But we're seeing insights into Kakaru's personage, you know, the idea that he feels he isn't worth anything, and that he's even bad. He wears a facade, like everybody does. Everybody puts on a game face to show themselves as something, you know, more befitting of people, other people's expectations. And so he's doing that, but he considers himself to be poison. And so he is the poison apple. You know, he's not the witch or anything. He literally is the apple. And Koharu needs to eat the apple, and he is the apple. And, you know, multi-layers of suggestive things going on there. And it's just, once again, I kind of want to see them coming together because of just how much Koharu feels so badly and poorly about himself. And he feels like he's the bane of his own existence and all this kind of stuff. And in Koharu's innocence, in her ill-perceived, you know, sort of naivete, she just has a very simple nature, and her simplicity allows her to embrace him and say, no, you're not, you know, maybe you are bad, but you're not poisoning just because of your own weaknesses and your self-doubt and all these things. She can be very supportive of him. She can be the thing that lifts him up and keeps him going. And it's just the characterization, you know, the insights we gain through this fantasy world backdrop, which, you know, in another series might have been really handled much more goofily and not to be taken seriously, but there was a lot of real, genuine character depth and growth going on with this as the backdrop, making it that much more just pleasing to watch and compelling to watch. And so by the end, of course, all three girls wake up out of this, and there is that ambiguous question: do the guys, did they experience the same thing? Do they know what was going on? Is it going to be something very lucid to them, or is it going to be something very vague? Will they forget it? Will this do anything, you know, making any sort of headway into bringing these respective girls and guys together in the waking world? And it also looks like, you know, as per the PV for the next episode, while there may be some awareness and questioning of that whole dream sequence effect, it also looks like Gunman is back and all hell's gonna break loose. You know, like I saw a tank and shots being fired. And so, man, freaking excellent episode. Absolutely loved it. Speaking to my passions, I mean, you know, from a very early age, I thought I wanted to be an animator just because of how much I loved Disney films. And I was always consumed with the behind-the-scenes thing, and that's kind of something that's carried over into my modern adult love of anime and everything like that. Just the quality. You know, it is two ends of the spectrum with Disney, which is somewhat more wholesome and fantasy-based and happily ever after, not in all cases. But anime is much more, there's much more depth to it, and adult themes and mature themes. And with this episode, you kind of had a mixture of both. And whereas if it were done any differently, it might have been off-putting, this was pitch perfectly melded together, at least to my estimation. So I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below. If you've seen episode 5 of Norn9, if you enjoyed the episode, the way it was formatted with this fantasy backdrop and everything like that, this sort of dreamland that garnered much more insight into the characters respectively as they interacted with each other, as they felt about themselves, and you know, or take it or leave it, love or hate, and anything goes in the comments below. Our POVs can certainly disagree. If you did not find it enjoyable to watch, let me know why, and I love hearing from you. So otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.